It's Monday night, and you know what that means. The Jersey First Television Network proudly brings to you the latest edition of Real Talk. And certainly, I am the generational talent in Garden State Media and your trusted leader, folks, in, again, respected journalism. I can't say enough, folks. Really appreciate all you tuning in every single week. And that's right, it is me, Fernando Uribe. Happy Monday. Happy December. As a matter of fact, as you can see, for another week, Victory Monday for me. Hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving, folks. I know I did. Another win by my Dallas Cowboys as we're creeping up into the playoff picture. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later with my guest in just a few moments, big sports fan himself. So we'll definitely chat about that. And folks, again, I want to thank you all for tuning in from wherever and however you may be doing so right now on Facebook Live via StreamYard, also on X, as well as Instagram, LinkedIn, and all of our social media platforms. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to like us on Facebook. Of course, follow us on Instagram and X. Subscribe to us on YouTube. And, of course, whether you check out your podcast on Spotify or SoundCloud, download Jersey First, and you'll be automatically notified of all the great content we bring you every single week here, courtesy of Jersey First TV. And that's right, folks, front and center. It is yours truly leading the way here for Jersey First. Again, educating and advocating for the residents here in our great state of New Jersey. Folks, brand new episodes every Monday night. Again, check your local listings for start times, and we'll continue to bring you the best analysis and commentary about everything going on in New Jersey politics. It's always Real Talk with Fernando Uribe here on Jersey First TV. Folks, we have a jam-packed show. You want to stick around for final thoughts and a special comment because I have a lot to say, really, folks. Quite frankly, yet another successful month here in 2025. Over 95,000 organic views here on the program. Again, I cannot do it without all of you who tune in every single week, who tune in live, who share the replays, who share it on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, as well as all the other social media platforms. Again, folks, without all of you, this number would not be possible. Of course, I owe it all to you, but of course, folks, I also owe it to those clowns behind me. Yes, folks, there's no shortage of bad actors in New Jersey media, academia, advocacy, or activism who, again, give me so much material and, again, make the traffic on this show absolutely possible. And, of course, when I think about bad actors in media in New Jersey, yes, folks, of course, I think about Max Pizarro. And, again, I'll stick to my promise from last week. Again, after making peace with Pete O'Nelia at the League of Municipalities, I don't have a bad word to say about General Manager Pete O'Nelia or the Graham family at Insider NJ. Now, as far as some of the employees, well, I can't keep that promise because, again, they just keep putting out bad stuff out there. So I'll let you know about the latest awful piece by Max Pizarro and why it's, again, not believable. But what else is new, folks, here with Max Pizarro? More on that later during Final Thoughts. And, of course, folks, I'll also have a special comment. Again, ladies and gentlemen, like, comment, and share tonight's episode. It takes a few seconds. That's all it is. It really helps the show grow, and it really helps get the show out to more people as Real Talk with Fernando Uribe continues to be the leader in trustworthy journalism here in the Garden State every single week. I owe it all to you, again, who tune in every single week. Folks, you know, when we talk about great journalists in New Jersey, yes, it's easy to put myself over, but I don't want to do that. I actually want to put someone else over, and why not put over one of the absolute best journalists out there, folks? He is the politics reporter and columnist for NJ Advanced Media, a big sports fan himself, and a guy who I have an incredible amount of respect for, as I just mentioned, folks. That's right. He's the great Brent Johnson, joins us live right now on Real Talk. Brent, how are you? Welcome back.
Doing good. Thank you for having me, Fernando. Always a pleasure to be here.
Appreciate it, man. How was your Thanksgiving, brother?
Good. We went to my parents' house. They live. We live in Spotswood, and they live in East Brunswick. So we always pop over there, and my mother-in-law comes and joins. So it was very nice. How was yours?
It was great, man. Got to spend it with family. As you can see, I'm still a little giddy about last week's Eagles beating the Chiefs on Thanksgiving. We're back in the playoff race, as they say. So I'm a little
better
giddy.
than my Giants. Better than my Giants. So.
We'll see tonight. Listen, you got to make some progress, right? With Jackson Dart, you got to get him out there, right?
I'm happy with the quarterback situation. Everything else needs to fall into place.
Yes, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the show. But
yeah.
Brent, good to see you once again. And it's been a few weeks now since Election Day, and quite honestly, a result that many of us did not expect with the margins that we saw a couple weeks ago. Actually, the week right after Election Day, I had David Wallstein on, big fan of the show, and a big friend of the show as well, the editor of the New Jersey Globe, who really helped me break down the data after the election. And I'll be honest with you, man, it's another reminder that polling continues to not be a very exact science. I mean, again, we had polling right after Labor Day, within single digits, almost tied at some point. But what happened really between actually maybe between Halloween and Election Day that got into double digits for a win for Representative Cheryl?
Yeah, this was a weird one. I mean, because it wasn't just that the polling was showing that it was close. It was also what I was hearing on the ground. Meaning, I had Democratic operatives telling me that they didn't know. They thought it was a jump ball, that it was really difficult to predict. And I had Republicans feeling good. These are high-ranking people who I speak to who didn't predict what this race turned into. That Cheryl's people thought that, yeah, they were confident about having a victory, but they certainly didn't think that it would be 14 points. I mean, the people who support her. So that was a surprise, and I feel like Republicans were shocked too. They certainly thought this was going to be closer. Yes, they certainly thought it was going to be closer, but sorry, my daughter was stopping to say hi. So they certainly thought it was going to be closer, but and there's some thoughts that maybe the shutdown played a role in this race, that it colored the what happened, and that all kinds of things at play here. It was just a tough one to gauge, a tough one to predict, and in the end, a 14-point victory for Cheryl. It was a solid victory for her. So a lot of questions going forward.
It really was surprising. And again, to your point about what you heard on the ground, and again, you got better ears than I do when it comes to sources. But Brent, what was surprising to me was, again, talking to a lot of Democrat operatives throughout the state, to just echo your point, that they were very worried. They were concerned, even after both debate performances by Cheryl, which were not great. And I felt Chitterelli did better than her, not overwhelmingly better, but I think somewhat better. But the bottom line was, it just looked like there were a lot of variables that worked against Republicans in this election cycle. As you mentioned, the shutdown at the time, and coincidentally, actually, it ended a few days later after the election, which
Yeah.
kind of funny, but and really gaining nothing from the shutdown. But what was interesting too was it felt like, well, maybe this is a barometer of whether or not just being anti-Trump is going to be enough to get you across the finish line. And for a lot of people, Brent, it just seemed to me, people I talked to afterwards, that seemed to be the case where, and again, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole about numbers and data, but again, Cheryl got about 1.9, almost 2 million votes. And I believe Chitterelli got about 1.5-ish.
Yeah.
So that's about 500,000 less votes that a Republican candidate on the ballot got from last year. Again, now, Donald Trump in 2024 came within 5 points of getting, New Jersey's 14 electoral votes, which is unheard of since the days of George H.W. Bush. And that's how far back we're going. And it just felt for a lot of people that, hey, maybe there isn't this energy with Jack. The president didn't come to New Jersey to campaign for him. Could that have made a difference? Could going to MetLife Stadium or Prudential Center and maybe filling it up a little bit, could that have helped Jack? I don't know, but it just seemed that to a lot of independents and Republicans I talked to, it just seemed like, without Trump on the ballot, there wasn't as much enthusiasm. And even though that Chitterelli didn't embrace Trump in 2021, when he came within 3 points of beating Phil Murphy, he embraced him completely. And my goodness, it turned into a 14-point loss. Any correlation there? I mean, what were you hearing about this?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, because the numbers are kind of wonky, because Jack did significantly better numbers wise in pure vote totals than he did last time. He got more votes than he got last time. In fact, it was the most votes any Republican gubernatorial candidate had gotten since 1969. Just that Cheryl got the most votes of any gubernatorial candidate in history. So, I know a lot of people on both sides were saying this was a backlash against Trump at the last minute, even though Democrats or Republicans were blaming Democrats for the federal government shutdown. There were a lot of variables that happened. Trump came in and said he was going to cancel the Gateway Tunnel, and that then there was the SNAP benefits thing in the final weekend. And so basically, so if you talk to Democrats, it was a combination of things. It was one, that there was an anti-Trump vote, and two, that Cheryl had a resume that connected with some people, a number of people, and she promised the freeze on the utility bills, even though she got some pushback from that. And Republicans say there's a number of things. Maybe there was a messaging issue. Maybe Trump should have come because the problem is, people don't vote. Republicans don't vote as much in elections when Trump isn't on the ballot. They're still trying to figure out how that happens. It was, again, so many things in hindsight that maybe we should have paid more attention to, but just a weird race to try and describe, write about, talk about. And some people just felt that maybe the Republican Party needs a reset in New Jersey, and maybe that who knows what's going to happen a few years from now.
Well, and that's great that you mentioned that, because that helps me segue into I don't want to sound completely apocalyptic here, Brent, but I'm a conservative. I don't apologize about that, but
Mhm.
I just get this sense. I was there at the Marriott in Bridgewater on election night, and going into the evening, there was a lot of enthusiasm. But then within the first 15 minutes, as Virginia was called really right after 8 o'clock by the Associated Press, we were like, oh my goodness, maybe the same thing's going to happen here. And my God, it just seemed like such a buzzkill. And then at the end of the day, looking at operatives from different counties, seeing some Republican county chairs, and things of that nature. I mean, again, I don't want to sound like doom and gloom here, but it seemed like Jack had the wind at his back. I mean, the affordability thing he was hammering home. He was very policy specific. And, when you look at polling, again, not an exact science, but everything in New Jersey, Brent, we're both homeowners, right? So
Yeah.
we drive cars. I mean, our property taxes are the highest in the country. We continue to pay higher tolls this year, probably into next year as well. Even though, oil production went up and, gas prices are down, and still the gas tax is the fourth highest in the country here in New Jersey. So, again, it's not Republicans' fault that New Jersey is unaffordable. Democrats have controlled the legislature for a quarter century, and they had a governor for 2 terms that was a Democrat. So I said, this has to be the straw that breaks the camel's back,
Yeah.
where a Republican can win on just affordability alone, and that still didn't get Jack across the finish line. And I got to tell you, again, I just don't think I'm going to see a Republican governor in my adult life again. I just don't. Again, the registration disadvantage is already there. It just seems like independents didn't come out. It just seems like Democrats just, what? As uninspiring as Cheryl was a lot during the campaign, she still beat him by double digits. I just think that the NJGOP needs to just really be blown up, start from scratch. And the establishment GOP, I think that's been at this for some years now, I think they need to go away, Brandon. That's just my opinion.
Well, there's going to be a lot of soul searching. There's already been a lot of soul searching among Republicans. Again, this was an interesting election. The last time one party in New Jersey had won 3 straight governor's races was 1961. My dad was 8 years old. My mom was 9 years old. And I'm 42. So it was a long time ago. And so the wind did seem to be at Republicans' backs. Democrats have been in control for 8 years and 25 years in the legislature. And usually that we tend to go back and forth between parties here. We tend to throw the bums out who's ever in charge after 8 years or even 4 years. So, but and that's where you'll see a lot of Democrats will say the Trump factor played a big role here. It's still a blue leaning state, and maybe 10 months into the new Trump administration, enough independents and Democrats came out, and some Republicans didn't feel the need to come out because Trump wasn't on the ballot. They weren't excited. A lot of things to pick through in this election. You could do podcast after podcast talking about the results of this race. But yeah, one thing I kept hearing of, was Jack going to run for a 4th time? I have no indication that that's going to be the case. You'll probably see a different gubernatorial candidate on the Republican side in 4 years. I don't know who that's going to be. One name I keep hearing thrown out in the new star of the Republican Party, maybe someone like Mike Testa,
Yeah.
or maybe there's someone we don't even know about.
Yeah.
Like there's someone maybe we know but don't think of them as a statewide candidate. A lot can 4 years is a lifetime in politics. So, but yeah, you're going to see a new state party chair. Obviously, you might see new messaging, you might see new blood. There's a lot to sift through.
Brent, and folks, again, if you just joined us live right now, like, comment, and share tonight's episode here with NJ Advanced Media politics reporter Brent Johnson joining us live here on Real Talk. Brent, we'll get back to the Republicans in a minute, but shortly after the election, I know you had a great piece, obviously after Cheryl's victory, really helped break it down about what happened on election night for our viewers that maybe didn't get to read that piece. And folks, again, if you don't follow Brent on X, or don't read his comment or don't subscribe, and what are you waiting for? Just do that. 30 seconds. Trust me, it's definitely a newsletter worth reading. But for our audience that wasn't aware of it, take us through what that piece consisted of.
Yeah, we looked at why was this? Because going in, there was a dead heat poll a few days before election day from a very reputable pollster, Atlas Intel, that correctly predicted the last two presidential races. And even a Suffolk poll showed that Cheryl was only up by 4. There was an Emerson poll that showed her up by 1. All polls for the most part showed Cheryl either leading or tied. No public independent poll had Chitterelli ever up. So polling showed Cheryl up, but no one's poll had this close to the race being 14. So we looked at why did that happen? Why did even the internal polls show single digits? And the thought among a lot of Democrats, as I said, was that there was the campaign improved over time, that where she was accused of being milquetoast and not having specific enough answers, that she kind of leaned into affordability, pinned it on Trump, and then put an ad out talking about Jack being a tax raiser, even though Jack would tell you that it was taken out of context and he actually wasn't going to raise the tax. But at that point, the damage was probably already done. Republicans say there was a messaging issue, and that at the end of the day, she won almost every gender and racial demographic except for 2. Jack won white voters and white male voters. And, there just seem to be a number of issues, and it really depends on who you talk to. Because the other thing is, Cheryl's campaign pushes back against the narrative that they improved over that. They figured it out in the final weeks. They say that they had the strategy all along and they were proven right. And you'll have Democrats will push back and say, well, they definitely fix some things down the line. And Republicans have been relatively quiet in the weeks after this. I don't know if there's a level of embarrassment or shock. Um, uh, Chitterelli hasn't really said anything publicly since his concession speech. You've had a few people from the Republican Party talk about what happened, but the thought is, then the big factor, everyone thinks, they look at the shutdown. That even though Republicans have blamed Democrats for shutting down the government, which is technically true because they're the ones not voting for the continuing resolution, because they're saying that they want to make sure everybody gets health care. But Republicans say that clearly Democrats and independents have sided against the Republican Party in the shutdown, and the Gateway Tunnel and the SNAP benefits thing didn't help. It happened at the wrong time. Because I had heard if this election, and one thing that I hear from both sides, if this election happened 2 weeks earlier, 3 weeks earlier, that it would have been a much different race.
Listen, I'm with you on that. And again, we'll never know. But I can tell you, I mean, obviously, you spoke to a lot of operatives, as did I. There was a lot of concern by a lot of county people, a lot of very deep blue areas in New Jersey. I mean, they were concerned, and it was interesting because when it comes to turnout, and I think you've read about this, but it was interesting for Chitterelli's campaign and the operatives that felt getting certain endorsements were going to make a difference. And I can tell you that, yeah, it made a difference, all right, here in Hudson County, where it emboldened, for example, the ongoing war that, as you know, has been going on for almost a quarter century between mayors Nick Sacco out of North Bergen and Mayor Brian Stack, my mayor here in Union City, where, again, Nick Sacco, whose political capital has really eroded since having to concede that state Senate seat to Brian Stack after redistricting. I can tell you on good information, Stack was, he wanted to make sure that he got Cheryl across the finish line for the primary. He did not want Philip to win. I mean, we all know the bad blood that exists between Sid Philip and Brian Stack. Mm-hmm. Mission accomplished. Accomplished. Stack got her across the finish line. A big turnout for her in Hudson County. And, pretty much the rest of the summer, you didn't hear a peep in Hudson County about Rebecca Cheryl. You didn't hear any events. She wasn't coming here. She wasn't featured. Nothing. The minute that, the brain trust of the NJGOP thought it was a good idea to have a Democrat mayor with no political capital to endorse Chitterelli, all they did was infuriate Stack. And you saw, whether it's on Twitter or his Instagram, Brent, or on his Facebook, you saw the king of GOTV get people out to vote during early voting, during vote by mail. And that made a big difference in Hudson County, where Stack got the vote out for Cheryl. And again, not just Stack, but other counties, I think, did the same thing where, I think you got to be careful about what endorsement you get. I get it. Operators might say, well, an endorsement, you don't turn away an endorsement. Sometimes it might have to. It might not do you any good. And in this case, it really did a lot of harm to Chinarelli, especially up here in blue Hudson County.
Yeah, and it's a very Jersey story in general, because it's not as simple as this was just anti-Trump or it was pro-Cheryl or anti-Jack. I mean, there's always a lot of things at play in any election, and every election's a very different beast. As we saw, 2024 was not the same election as this year. 2021 wasn't the same election as this year. But it's a very New Jersey story to have this intra-party rivalry in one county kind of help shift the election results, and a very big bitter feud and between these two machine leaders, top Democrats. And that's what you get in Jersey. New Jersey's a weird political atmosphere, its own political ecosystem. And that was one of the many things that was at play here. And I think this is the kind of election that'll be analyzed for months or weeks, even years to come.
Absolutely. Now let's get to, obviously she's going to have to start governing at noon on January 20th. And, Rebecca Sherrill is going to have to live up to a lot of what she said on the campaign trail. Again, some careful wording. On day one, I'm going to declare a state of emergency, instead of being like, well, I'm going to do everything I can to lower costs, not just declare a state of emergency. I don't know how much it's going to help homeowners like you and me, Brent, but I mean, that's another conversation. But the point is that, again, she promised a lot: affordability, addressing property taxes. And while the legislature, again, is still in Democrat control with State Senate President Scutari and Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin, just advocating for an anchor program isn't going to be enough for property taxes, Brent. It's going to require the legislative leadership and Cheryl pretty much with a veto-proof majority, okay, obviously after winning some more seats, more on that later. It just seems like she's going to have to govern from day one, and I don't know what the margin of error is going to be for her, since she promised a lot on the campaign trail, Brent.
Well, that's when people right away, she's going to have the focus, the attention right away to see what she does on declaring that state of emergency, and whether her plan, she says she's going to freeze utility rates, whether that's going to pass legal muster. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of legal fight over it. So that's going to probably take up a good part of the focus of her early years, and then, of her early months. Then right away, within a month, she has to give a state budget speech. And this is, by all accounts, going to be a very difficult state budget. Especially this year and the year after that. The thought is revenue is not going to be as strong as in the past, and a lot of chickens are going to come home to roost over things that have happened in recent years. You'll even hear Democrats say that, not just Republicans. So there's going to be a lot to watch for early in her tenure. It's going to be, people are going to see, does she just carry on what Murphy does? Does she do different things? I've already heard that her cabinet's not going to have a lot of holdovers from the Murphy years. She's likely going to have new people at the top of departments. So there's going to be a lot to see. And, there's also already whispers that she could be a potential vice presidential candidate in a few years, that, she had such a strong victory and the Democratic Party might be looking for, the same things that helped her bio here, a former Congresswoman governor, the second woman governor in state history, a former Navy helicopter pilot, that might, if you see a Gavin Newsom or a Pete Buttigieg or another male candidate go for the Democratic nomination, then maybe she'd be a good running mate. And you're already hearing whispers of that, which is not surprising, because New Jersey has a very powerful governorship, and both parties have often have people talk about, oh, maybe there'll be a VP or a presidential candidate. We've only ever had one governor ever become president, obviously Woodrow Wilson 100 years ago. But, Chris Christie ran for president. There was even chatter that Phil Murphy might be considering it, Tom Kaine in the 80s. It's natural. So there's going to be a lot bouncing about in the beginning of her tenure.
Absolutely. And of course, with her election comes her resignation from the House of Representatives. And let's get into, this is turning into a WWE type battle royal in not just, her district in CD11, but also with the retirement of Representative Coleman in CD12. Yeah. So we'll get to that in a minute. But in CD11, it's looking like the Royal Rumble with that many participants. My goodness, what are you hearing on the ground right now, Brent, about what CD11 is going to look like?
The joke is that it seems like everybody who lives in CD11 is running for Congress, which, and that's the fall of the county line. For people to get a little inside baseball, the county line ballot system was thrown out last year, and it made it harder for non-party back candidates to win and non-incumbents to win. Now it's kind of open season, and the thought is that that's also why we had a heavy primaries in the governor's race this year. That now you're going to see a lot of people jump in and run because it's a bit easier to get support and to get voters out there. The thought without that the anchor of the county line. So that's one thing. You do still have Brendan Gill is considered the more establishment pick. He has the former uh, Phil Murphy campaign manager and Essex County commissioner who has Murphy's endorsement. And on the other side, you have Tom Malinowski, the former congressman who is now running again, and he has the support of Andy Kim, who's kind of the progressive darling. And then there's a lot of other people. There's a ton of other candidates. You can name them. There's those are considered the two top of the heap, but you never know. Some other candidate without the county line could come in and do very well. Analia Mejia or John Barrett. You have all these John Barnett. You have all these candidates who could jump in and do something. And one thing that's interesting to me is so far there's been few candidates on the Republican side. So I wonder if they're viewing this district as being heavily Democratic now and they don't have a shot. But it's not a fait accompli. Like this could be a real race even in the general election for the special election. And then, yeah, as you said, there's three other races to watch going into next year, and it's going to be big. Trump's congressional midterms. You have the ninth district where Nellie Poe won a tight race last time, and Republicans could try and flip her seat. You have Tom Kaine up for re-election in what's going to be a tough district in District 7. Who a number of Democrats are running in the primary to take on him, and the favorite right now is Rebecca Bennett, who is, as you guessed it, a former Navy helicopter pilot who is now running to be a congresswoman, a la Mikey Sherrill. And then you have District 12, as you mentioned, which is my district, where Bonnie Watson Coleman's retiring after a decade in the House. And that seat is a Democratic leaning seat. But again, Republicans could see that maybe they'll make inroads. A year away from now is an eon. It's eons away to be a year. So a lot could change. So even though the general thought right now is that Republicans are wounded going into the midterm elections, so much could change. As we saw in the last few weeks of the governor's race, Trump went from having a very big victory on the Gaza peace deal. Then the Gateway thing happened, and politics ping pong, especially in the days of social media now, when people have short attention spans.
Yeah, I mean, listen,
it could be different.
No, you're right, and nobody remembers at all about the Gaza peace deal, which was a big
no, I know it's amazing.
Because because within the Democrat Party, there's a progressive wing that was very much, I think, against the establishment going into the last election in 2024, where Democrats were kind of split on that, and that was a big deal. I mean, obviously, it's important to give the president his flowers on that, but again, the government shutdown, the Gateway Project being shut down. I mean, obviously, I think hurt Republicans. But to your point about, again, the way these districts, and these races are looking, again, Brent, I went to the League of Municipalities, I went to all the parties, and, obviously a lot of Democrats. It was a lot giddier this year than it was last year for sure. And, again, at every party possible, I saw a lot of people that are running for Congress. Gill, talked to Tom Malinowski for like 5 minutes, at the Insider NG party, talked to other candidates. And it was interesting where I'm like, wow, like this is the turnaround time is really quick. And again, for our audience at home that's not familiar, obviously she handed in her resignation last week. What's the timetable for a primary, again, and especially for her seat among the Democrat Party, and also in Coleman's seat and a district as well as others? I'm sorry, well, for Sherrill's seat specifically.
Yeah, because it's a special
primary, and then when is the general in that district?
Well, today was the filing deadline, so if you didn't get your ballots or your petitions in today, you're not on the ballot. But it looks like there's going to be more than a dozen candidates on both sides of the aisle for that special election. That's going to get a lot of attention because that's going to be early next year before the midterm. So that's going to get heavy amount of attention, especially coming after this governor's race. So yeah, the timeline is there's a primary in February, right after Valentine's Day, February 16th. Do I have that right? Sometime early February, and then the general election is April. I can't remember. That's April 16th.
Wow.
Either way, so yes, February primary, April general election, and so there's not a lot of turnaround time. You're gonna have to do quick campaigns, and that's where maybe the candidates with the most name recognition, the most party support, the most money. That's why the thought is Malinowski Gill is the real race to watch there on the Democratic side. But maybe if you split the vote, I mean, we saw that in the governor's race this year, and and especially on the Democratic side, the primary, you had six candidates and some vote splitting there. So maybe someone could sneak in. There's just a lot to watch. As anyone who says like New Jersey, it has no dull periods. New Jersey
No,
politics. There's no such thing as down. There's no off season.
no, there's an election every year, literally
Yeah,
every
it's
year.
amazing, and they worked it up that way. That's how they did that in the Constitution and the new state constitution in '47. That was the idea. They wanted to separate state politics from national politics. So that's impossible anymore because all politics is no longer local, and now all politics is
No,
national. But yeah,
absolutely.
but it means New Jersey always has something to watch in an election year. You can't not pay attention.
Now, Brent. Now, again, just based on the timeline you explained to us here, and folks, again, if you just joined us live, like, comment, and share tonight's episode here. As my guest is NJ Advanced Media politics reporter and columnist Brent Johnson joins us live here on Real Talk. Folks, again, helps the show grow, helps get the show out to more people here on Jersey First TV. Now, Brent, obviously that general election happens. You said in April. You said April, right?
Yes, the general election for the special election is April. Yep.
Okay, so now again, because the primary is still coming up in June, could there still be a primary for that seat, or whoever wins in April just goes to November against whoever the Republican's going to be?
Theoretically, yeah. You could have someone win the technically, if we're getting really technical here, you could have someone win the special election, do horribly in the first few months of their tenure, and then not win the primary in June. Usually, the thought is whoever wins the special election will be the nominee of their party for June's primary. But yeah, I mean, all kinds of crazy things could happen. You could have somebody who just didn't like the job who goes in there. Maybe, I'm just going to throw it. Maybe Brendan Gill wins that election, doesn't like the job or has a rough time, or Tom Malinowski, whoever. And but it's likely whoever wins that seat will run again in June, and then win the nomination and run in November. You could also see a primary where the winner of that special election does run in the primary, but maybe they lose the second primary, and maybe there's a new candidate. There's all kinds of possibilities for
I mean, there's a possibility that whoever maybe finishes a close second in the primary leading up to the special election might say, you know what, I got a following. I'm going to try to primary him or her come June. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, with the county line, that's whoever won back in the old days when the party bosses would have the county line at their disposal. Yeah, the thought would whoever wins the special election in April would definitely win in June. But then maybe that's not the case anymore. Maybe you could get part two of a crazy primary election. 2 in 1 year, 2 within a few months. So definitely something to pay attention on. This is the kind of race that's going to get some coverage.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it keeps us busy, obviously, as journalists, because there's no off season, as you said. Yeah. Now, on the flip side, there is the current state GOP chair is stepping down on December 31st. And obviously, there is going to be some movement about who the next NJ GOP chair is going to be. Again, not a lot of turnaround time here. It might be a thankless job because, as soon as you take office in January, I mean, you have to start thinking about, all right, running candidates in a lot of these congressional districts that maybe it's a thankless job. Maybe it's a no-win situation. But, I think whoever the next NJ GOP chair, whoever he or she is, I mean, it's not going to have a lot of time, I mean, to really learn on the job. I mean, it's going to have to be quick, as they say.
Yeah.
Again, because the primary's in June, and there are some districts that need Republican candidates. You just can't have Democrats win, the primary and then just run unopposed. I mean, that would be even more embarrassing than it is already for the NJGOP.
And then, there's also you also have a Senate seat up next year. Cory Booker is running for re-election. And, the thought is always that Booker is going to be, tough to beat just because he's Cory Booker, and the Democrat hasn't lost a Senate race in New Jersey since 1972. So he's the heavy favorite going in, but we still don't know who's going to vie for the Republican side there in the Senate race. You have all 12 House seats open in a very important year. There's local races. Then there's pushback on the state budget. You're going to have a lot of attention on the state budget this year, and then of course you're going to have to. Then you have legislative races the following year, and then thinking about I'm sure you're going to start seeing people talking about running for governor in 2027. Not running for. I mean, the next governor's race is 2028. but or 2029. But you'll probably see people in 2027 start to have whispers about that. So there's something, it's a thankless job to take over for a Republican Party that's wounded right now. But maybe you could remake it in your
Well,
image, and you could.
Brent, Brent, you're being awfully generous. It's life
It's a
support.
tough
It's
job.
not
Yeah,
wounded. We're talking about like Wolverine came in and just puncture wounded your
fair.
chest.
I have to
I
be
mean,
object. I have to be neutral here. I don't want to
yeah.
kick Republicans when they're
You're
down.
bleeding out right now, almost like after Wolverine just punctured your
But
chest.
but maybe that's a chance to remake the party and do something different. And the old saying is that when you're at your lowest, sometimes you can spring to your highest. And so who knows what could happen with the Republican Party? And as we see, the Democratic Party is the joke is that Republicans fall in line and Democrats tend to eat their own. And you can see the Democrats have all kinds of infighting happen in the coming years. You have a new governor who's not from Trenton, a governor who doesn't have the kind of relationships with these leaders that other people might. And we saw that at the beginning of the Murphy administration.
Yeah.
When Murphy came in, he was a quote unquote outsider, and he fought with the legislature, especially Steve Sweeney. He had a very difficult relationship with Steve Sweeney in the first few years. So who knows what's going to happen in the next few years?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we'll see what her relationship will be with State Senate President Nick Scutari and Assembly
Yeah.
Speaker Coughlin. Speaking of the Senate President, I know obviously I want to pick your brain about this. It's been in the headlines for the last few days. Certainly that T word, Brent, transparency. That is a word that is a big concern for anybody, whether you're a conservative, libertarian, liberal, progressive, Republican, whatever. There seems to be a concern about transparency or maybe the erosion of it in Trenton starting today. If you could give our viewers tonight a little bit of sort of a synopsis of like why there is such concern about transparency right now in Trenton.
So there's a big controversial bill that was heard passed out of State Senate committee today, a bill to consolidate New Jersey's watchdog agencies, government watchdogs, the people who watch over government and make sure it's not corrupt. That it would combine the state comptroller job with the state commission investigation commission, and it's State Senate President Nick Scutari is pushing it, and advocates, especially progressive advocates, and Andy Kim, the senator, and Kevin Walsh, the state comptroller, and State Attorney General Matt Placken, all came out against it today. There was a hearing today that was really contentious. Advocates say that they weren't given enough time to speak, and that it wasn't fair, and that the senators weren't really paying attention to this, and they're saying that it's the latest in a number of bills that have kind of eroded transparency. The first was an elections bill that changed election contributions and filings, called the Election Transparency Act, although advocates say it was anything but. Then after that, there was a bill to streamline OPRA, the Open Public Records Act, how people can access public records, that supporters say was meant to streamline it, but advocates say it was a complete overhaul and makes it harder for people to get records. So this would be step 3. This would be the latest in that. So I don't know where this bill is going. It passed out of committee, but I expect to see more uproar in the coming weeks on this. Advocates and a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans aren't very happy about this, and they think they're being steamrolled, and that Trenton, which already has a reputation for being corrupt and short on transparency, is only going to get worse. And that's what they said.
Folks, stay tuned for that for sure. Brent, I did look at your recent columns. Obviously, there's something that caught my eye. I wanted to pick your brain. It's about a little over a week old, but in the sense of cell phone usage in New Jersey classrooms, and there seems to be a consensus by one powerful lawmaker in Trenton that wants to ban cell phones in classrooms. Now, you're a parent, talking to parents tonight on the show here, obviously our viewers. Let's separate fact from fiction. What's the cause of this, and where do you see this going?
So this is a long standing proposal. Governor Murphy introduced this idea, and it's not new. I mean, it's not single to New Jersey. A number of states have taken up these type of proposals. So Governor Murphy proposed during his State of the State address back in January that he wanted a bell-to-bell cell phone ban in schools, meaning students would drop off their phones before school started, lock them away, and you would get it back at the end of the day. Proponents say it'll help kids pay attention more. It'll help their learning, that kids have become too distracted. I'm 42, so I didn't have a cell phone until I got to college, so I didn't have to go through school without having a cell phone. And my kids are too young yet. My son Carter is almost 2, and my daughter Everly is almost 5, and they don't have a cell phone yet. So I haven't had to deal with this personally as a parent. But then the opponents will say that parents want to be able to get in touch with their kids, and that this will make it more difficult, and that there's a whole mountain out of molehill. And now it hasn't really gone anywhere in recent months. Murphy introduced it in January, but it hadn't really taken flight. Now we have the lame duck legislative session, which is before the new administration takes over. So you have more kind of controversial bills tend to go through, a lot more negotiating and horse trading. Maybe this is something that gets horse traded during lame duck in the coming weeks. Craig Coughlin, the state assembly speaker, told me that he supports this. He supports a bell-to-bell ban, so it has support in the state assembly. The question is, how much will Scutari, the state senate president, support it? Because you need both houses to pass it and Murphy to sign it for it to become law. So right now it's up in the air, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of law that comes out of this with some sort of cell phone ban, or having districts make their own rules. I'm not quite sure where it's going to go yet, but this is a topic you will see discussed in the coming weeks.
So you say your son's 5, right?
My daughter's 5, my son is 2. Almost. They're
So
both still 1 and 4, but almost there.
So wait a minute. You want to deny her access to Mets Twitter and what's going on with the New York Metropolitan?
Good God. I mean, I do always say being a Mets fan is a wonderful continuous life lesson on all the ways to learn about defeat and sadness.
Sure.
And I would never want to her to spend too much time on Mets Twitter, because that is a cesspool of depression and anxiety. So,
I mean, let's be fair. I mean, I think Mets Twitter is going to be a lot more uplifting than the NJGOP right now. At least if you look at it right
yeah,
now.
fair.
Sure.
I mean, maybe Steve Cohen could come take over the state GOP, and
Oh
maybe
my
they could figure
God,
things out.
Uncle Stevie to the rescue.
Yeah, he is friends with Chris Christie, so it's not out of the realm.
True. Brent, obviously, you mentioned Governor-elect Cheryl will be introducing her new budget in February, as mandated, obviously. And as we all know, I mean, let's cut through the bullshit, right? It's going to go months and months of discussion, and the last week of June, it'll be voted on at midnight, and there'll be some pork projects in there. Who knows?
That is the trend. Yep.
Nothing shocks us anymore. But what are you hearing on the ground about what Cheryl would like to address in the new budget? Obviously, having new people, a new attorney general. Hopefully, I'm not a fan of Matt Placken, so governance to him. But she'll have a new administration, obviously a new team. But what are you hearing on the ground about what she really wants to address in the budget? Again, it ballooned up since Chris Christie. It nearly doubled in the 8 years of Phil Murphy. What are you hearing? Does she want to sort of shave that down, or do you think maybe it has to even go even higher? I mean, God forbid.
She has not shied away from saying that this is going to be a difficult budget. She's told me on numerous occasions that this is going to be tough. There's going to be a lot. There was a lot of spending during the Murphy years, and the Murphy proponents will say that was needed to fix the pension system and rework the school funding formula. Obviously, the Republicans say it went too far, and there was too much pork in that. So that's a really good question. I know she wants to change the school funding formula. That's going to take buy-in from both legislative houses. So who knows what that's going to look like? Because that's a whole nother issue. You throw an arrow and there's 5 different opinions on the state budget, state school funding formula. So I know she's talking about that, and she also has talked about, I want to lower property taxes, which is the toughest thing to do in New Jersey. Everyone says they want to lower property taxes, but who actually gets it done? She's likely to continue to support the anchor program, which Democrats put in place under Murphy. Then the big question is the Stay NJ property tax program for seniors, which is Coughlin's pet project, that goes into full funding next year. But one of the big questions has always been, can the state afford it? You've had Democrats and Republicans saying, I don't think the state can afford that, and that might need some changes. So who knows where that's going to go? But so there's, the budget's going to be, no one really knows exactly what the revenue numbers are going to be. But if the revenue is on the lower end, there's going to have to be cuts or tax hikes. So something's got to give. The state budget increased every year under there.
Brent, you still with us?
Yeah, sorry, I think I lost you for a second. Yep. Okay. Yeah, so there's the budget's going to be, if the elections are the number one thing to talk about in 2026, the budget's going to be number 2.
Brent, now again, as we said before, there's no off season here in New Jersey politics. There's an election to cover every single year. Certainly not just with her win, which was a decisive win. she had coattails, and subsequently Republicans who were already, at a big disadvantage in the assembly, again, at the time, where it was 52-28 in favor of Democrats going into election day, Democrats picked up even more seats. And again, it kind of renders Republicans quite powerless now to even put up any fight whatsoever in the state assembly. I think they won maybe, 5 or 6 seats, maybe more.
Yeah, 5 seats. Yep.
Yeah. What were some, I mean, I know there were some upsets there. What was the biggest surprise for you in terms of assembly wins by Democrats a few weeks ago?
Yeah, well, one district, the 21st district in central Jersey, up by Union County, that is John Bramnick's district, the state senator. He wasn't on the ballot because the Senate wasn't on the ballot, but both assembly seats, which have long been Republican, were lost, including Nancy Munoz, a very well-respected, well-liked on both sides of the aisle assemblywoman. And that was one surprise, that the district's trended more blue over the years, but it's held on as a Republican district because incumbents tend to do better. The other big surprise was down in South Jersey. There were a few upsets down there with candidates who weren't expected to win in the Atlantic City area and in Burlington County. So there were a number of races that were unexpected. The thought going in was Democrats thought maybe they'll pick up a seat, maybe they'll lose a seat, maybe it'll stay the same. But again, kind of like the Sherrill race, it wasn't thought that it was going to be 5 seats. This again, another surprise on that end. So, and then those seats are up again in 2 years. The Senate and the Assembly's up again in 2 years. That'll be Sherrill's midterms. So maybe they've gone back and forth in recent years. The year Chitterelli lost to Murphy, Republicans gained 6 seats, and then they lost them back. They send them back 2 years later. So who knows? Maybe again, this is such an unusual time for politics. One thing I often hear people from both parties say is that it's hard to predict these races in the political climate we have. The politics of 2017, 2014, 2010 don't exist anymore. It's so hard to gauge. Polling's unusual. People feel strongly about their opinions. People tend to go back and forth on what they're thinking. So it makes politics more difficult to cover, but also more interesting to watch.
Certainly, and something to watch in the new Sherrill administration. It was a topic that came up a lot, even during the primary, Brent, and even now during the general, was Sherrill's position on the Immigrant Trust Directive. Obviously,
Yes.
We know that the president has not been shy in the sense of letting ICE do their job, going state to state. Obviously, New Jersey remains a sanctuary state because of Sherrill's win. But subsequently, some progressive groups are still concerned as to whether or not she's going to be even more on the sides of illegals here in New Jersey, especially where the Immigrant Trust Directive is still in limbo. What are you hearing from her camp in the sense of where that's going to go? And ultimately, listen, if the president wants to make an example of New Jersey and send ICE agents to do their job as constitutionally he's allowed to do, and coincide with federal law, what's Sherrill's camp going to do with that moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the more difficult things to pin her down on during the campaign. The Immigrant Trust Directive, for those who don't know, it's a directive Murphy's administration put in place in his first year. Then Attorney General Gerber Graywall put it in. That it says that basically it limits what local police can do to help ICE. There's no requirement they have to help ICE, and that it basically gives them carte blanche not to agree to work with ICE. It's controversial because even some Democrats think maybe it goes too far, and that there's a bill that has long stalled in the state legislature that would write that into law, because right now it's just a directive and the next attorney general could wipe it away if they want to. So the bill would write it into law, and progressive advocates and immigration advocates all say that this has to get done. They really want it to get done in lame duck right now when there's more capital to get something done. Sherrill has said she thinks she supports the directive, but is against it going into state law because she thinks it would open up a can of worms. It would put it into a legal battle, and then it might get overturned. And so that's been something no one really knows where she stands. It could go away in her tenure, although she might find some kind of middle ground. She has said she believes that immigrants deserve due process. So that's another thing to watch for as she takes office.
What are you hearing, Brent, about who her attorney general is going to be? Again, the governor of New Jersey is one of the more powerful ones in the country because, as opposed to other states where the voters elect an attorney general, the governor of New Jersey nominates, and subsequently the attorney general is appointed, obviously through the Senate Judiciary Committee. in Trenton. What are you hearing on the ground right? I mean, again, for me, listen, I can say it's my show. Good riddance to Matt Plotkin. I can't wait to see him go. But what are you hearing about her camp and who maybe will fill that spot as the state's most important and powerful law enforcement officer?
It's been funny, you talk to a lot of operatives on the Democratic side, and it's been kind of silent on at this point in Murphy when he came in 2017, 2018. We heard a lot of names being thrown around for a lot of positions, and there was all kinds of speculation. And now we're into December. She just made her first cabinet appointment today. We learned where Lieutenant Governor elect Dale Caldwell is going to serve. He's going to be the Secretary of State, just like Tahisha Way is. So that was the first cabinet appointment, but that's not a new name. So the question is, a lot of people pay attention to who's going to be the Attorney General, who's going to be the State Treasurer, who's going to be the Department of Education Commissioner. So the Attorney General is a big one because for the last few years we've had Matt Plotkin, Murphy's Attorney General, sue Trump numerous times and really be a progressive leader and being against Trump. She already said Plotkin's not going to be the Attorney General. The only name I've really heard thrown around is State Senator John McKeon, who is an attorney from Essex County, Democrat, who I've heard a few times mentioned as possible Attorney General pick over the years. But that's the one name I've heard. I don't know. There's also thought he might become the DEP commissioner. But again, I haven't heard a ton of names thrown around, which is kind of weird. But again, this is, as I stressed before, this is a new this isn't someone who's served in Trenton. This isn't someone who has Trenton ties, meaning Cheryl. So maybe she's going for something completely new. There's again a lot to pay attention to in the coming days.
Sure, Brent. For lack of a better word, State Senator Zwicker has not been shy about standing up for public broadcasting. Obviously, we know that state funding, not just at the federal level, but in the last state budget, was cut considerably for NJPBS.
Yeah,
obviously, is part of it. NJ Spotlight News. We've seen establishment media in New Jersey dying out. We saw obviously the print edition of the Star Ledger die out. Certainly the Bergen Record. We've seen other establishment media apparatuses quickly eroding. I would argue, Brent, that, again, if you're not putting out a good product, sorry, you don't deserve taxpayer dollars. But some would argue that, well, listen, New Jersey without public broadcasting is doing its residents a disservice. What are you hearing on the ground right now about in Trenton, whether or not that funding can be replenished? And really, again, the future of journalism in New Jersey, where, again, you work for NJ Advanced Media via NJ.com. It's an online apparatus, but slowly but surely, we're seeing sort of the traditional establishment media apparatuses quickly dying.
That's true. And it's a daily question of what to do next and how to get attention and how you have to survive in this industry. It's every day it's a new challenge. And you're seeing that on the public broadcasting side too. The question is, how much more funding is there going to be, because you're not getting it on the federal end, and the state funds are also it's going to be a tough state budget. But this is the kind of thing where, yes, it's always important to have a robust independent media. You need people to call out shenanigans. You need people to question authority. And the more outlets, whether it be public or private, the better. And so, I support having all kinds of media. You don't just want one place to go to get your media. You want it all over the place. And Zwicker is going to be someone who's going to continue to fight for this. He is an up and coming, rising Democratic star. He very well might run for Bonnie Watson Coleman's seat in the 12th congressional district. There's been talk maybe he'd be a person in Cheryl's cabinet, but I think you're more likely to see him run for Congress. So I don't expect this topic to go away.
Right before I let you go, obviously you're as big a sports fan as I am.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm still giddy about my Dallas Cowboys. I'm giddy about my Lakers up to a 14-4 start. But at the end of the day, you and me are true blue baseball fans.
Yes,
and
that's true.
As a devoted and miserable Yankee fan, which sounds kind of like oxymoronic to say,
that's true, yeah,
to a Met fan. The winter meetings start in Florida next week.
Yeah.
Our general manager, Brian Cashman, seems to be having more fun, sleeping outdoors, overnight. And again, great cause. I don't want to down on it. Great cause to raise awareness about youth homelessness. But, it just seems like the Yankees are years away from another championship. And I know I sound spoiled because it's going to be going on 16 years now, which matches their last drought. The Mets, obviously, after reaching the LCS, very disappointing season. The Yankees, after reaching the World Series, another disappointing season. Where do you see, again, real quick, as a baseball fan, where do you see the Mets' biggest holes that need to be addressed this offseason? And is Uncle Stevie just going to break the bank with unlimited money, or does there need to be some fiscal restraint in Queens?
There will be some fiscal restraint in Queens. It's a really big question because the biggest question mark is whether Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz are going to come back, and then they traded Brandon Nimmo, so that means they're not afraid to let fan favorites go. Although Alonso's at a different level. I mean, Alonso playing in another uniform would be a major shock. He's my favorite player, my second favorite Met of all time after Mike Piazza. I would be devastated if he wasn't here, and you also can't replace his production in the lineup. But they also have a hole now because Brandon Nimmo got traded. Who knows who's going to be playing in the outfield for them? The Yankees and Mets might be both going after Cody Bellinger, both going after Kyle Tucker. Maybe the Yankees make a play at Alonso. The Red Sox might make a play at Alonso. This is a fascinating winter. Plus, you're also going into next year where there might be a lockout for the new CBT for the Players Union. So, who knows? But I expect the Yankees to make some sort of splash. I wouldn't be surprised if Bellinger went back to the Yankees. I wouldn't be surprised if Alonso went back to the Mets and maybe Kyle Tucker ended up on one of those two teams. But a lot to watch for.
Brent, baseball is as big a sport as there is in North America. Ballparks continue to be full every weekend, every week across the country. Do the owners have a point here about maybe the need for a salary cap? Because you look at some of these contracts in recent years, and you're hearing guys that are on the trading block. For example, Fernando Tatis Jr., he signed a 14-year deal 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Juan Soto signed a 16-year deal. There's a lot of these crazy contracts.
Nutty contracts, yeah.
Do the owners have a point, you think, about maybe the need for a cap?
If you're being objective, probably true. I mean, bringing a cap to baseball would probably bring more parity and change things. But I don't know how much of an appetite the union's going to have for it. I expect this to be a pretty brutal. I mean, we all remember the strike of 1994. I was 11 years old and devastated that there wasn't a World Series that year. It took the following season for Cal Ripken Jr.'s streak to bring baseball back, and then the famous Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, home run off of 1998. So I don't know. It feels like baseball's getting a little bit more momentum. The World Series had a lot of viewers, and that younger generations are coming to watch baseball more. And I hope they don't shoot themselves in the foot next year and kill that momentum with a lockout.
I mean, kill you. I mean, the Yankees are the best record in 1994. I mean, Donnie Baseball, I thought was going to get that ring.
I know. Yeah.
It ended up not happening. But Brent,
poor Don Mattingly.
Oh, God. I mean, poor Donnie Baseball. I mean, the guy can't catch a break for sure.
No.
Brent, your newsletter continues to be one of the best, if not the best out there for New Jersey politics. What are we working on? Again, Thanksgiving just passed. It's a lame duck session, but like you said, there's no offseason. There's no bye week, as they say in New Jersey politics. So what can we look forward to round out 2025 and to start 2026 with your newsletter and everything with NJ Advanced Media?
Yeah, well, we're going to be paying attention to lame duck because there's a lot of bills, whether it be this controversial comptroller bill or cell phones in schools, that you're going to see some major changes coming to New Jersey in this legislative session. And then we're going to be getting ready for a new administration. There's going to be all kinds of new cabinet members, all things to see what Cheryl's going to do. So this is going to be a interesting lame duck and an interesting new administration. So there's going to be plenty to watch for, and we'll have plenty to write and talk about.
Brent, you're always a gentleman to come on the show. I really appreciate your time. You're one of the best out there, and it's always a privilege because you're super busy, and you don't have to come on this show, but I appreciate, your faith in my brand of journalism, and I'm always grateful to you. I'll give you the last word here tonight.
Just pay attention to Trenton. It's more than ever, all kinds of craziness going on. So wherever you get your news, pay attention to it. My newsletter's every Thursday on what makes Jersey run, and I will forever say, let's go Mets. Let's see how these winter meetings work out. But I really hope number 20, Mr. Alonso's, resigns.
Brent, before I forget, I know you're also a musician. Any gigs coming up that we should be made aware of?
We don't have any gigs lined up over the winter because we're making a new record right now. My brother and I, I'm in a band called the Clydes, where I'm in 400 Records. And we're writing a new record and recording it. So there will be new music from us. We had a new EP out earlier this summer called Everything's Not Dark. And there'll be new music in the early year, and there'll definitely be more shows.
Okay. So, do me a favor. Let me know. I want to see you. Obviously, I've seen you in person, but I want to see you play as well.
Great.
Brent, Merry Christmas to you. Happy holidays to you and your family. God bless you. Folks, he is Brent Johnson, the NJ Advanced Media politics reporter. Our guest tonight. Brent, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great holiday season.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Take care, bro.
Bye.
Folks, good stuff there with Brent Johnson again. Obviously, great to accommodate us tonight. I know, obviously, being outdoors isn't always easy. Certainly some cold temperatures, so I appreciate Brent being on the show tonight. And again, I can see the nice traffic on here tonight for the program, and he's always, a treat to have. Nobody really knows Trenton like Brent Johnson. He's one of the best journalists that I have the privilege of talking to on a regular basis here on this show. Again, obviously, I get to talk to David Wildstein, the editor-in-chief of the New Jersey Globe, as well as other journalists, obviously within our market area. So whenever I can get Brent Johnson on, I always reach out to him, and he's always very gracious to come on the show. And where other journalists may not want to come on here for whatever reason, I don't know. They don't like conversations, and who knows? But that's not the case with Brent Johnson, folks. A gentleman and a great reporter and a big sports fan too, and a big baseball fan. So always love to hear his insight about what's going on with Major League Baseball. Him being a dedicated Met fan, me being a dedicated Yankee fan. We'll see what happens with our ball clubs coming up into 2026. Folks, again, it's 7 o'clock here on the East Coast. I appreciate you guys tuning in here. As you know, it's time for Final Thoughts. And folks, talked about it earlier in the program, but part of the reason this show continues to do really, really well, as we're about to close out another successful year of Real Talk here with Jersey First TV, is not just because of yours truly, again, being the generational talent in Garden State Media, of course, the leader in trustworthy journalism. That's right, folks. Fernando Uribe is that guy. But part of the reason the show continues to be successful too is because of Final Thoughts and because of the fact that these clowns behind me give me so much material every single week. Because, folks, let's be honest, whether it is some of these clowns out there, and you know what I'm talking about, the social justice clowns, the woke fools, the obese feminists, the smelly cat ladies, all right? The alphabet mob, folks, you name it, there is no shortage of insufferable human beings in New Jersey. Again, whether it's in academia, whether it's in activism, whether it's in media, journalism, or advocacy, take your pick, folks. Again, you have Antoinette Pope there from the New Jersey Working Families Party. My God, when you think about insufferable women in New Jersey, Antoinette comes to mind. When you think about, media and journalism, when you think about some of the soy boys and the beta males, like, Joe Amaditis over there at the Center for Cooperative Media at Woke State University over in Montclair, or some of the more useless, activists in New Jersey, like Bob Medina, right? I mean, folks, can you think of a more useless couple than Bob and his wife, Patricia? I mean, I can't think of it. And it was interesting to run into Bob Medina at the League of Municipalities, during the Insider NJ party, where I'm like, wait a second, it's after 9 o'clock. What's Bob Medina doing up at this hour? Like, isn't his bedtime like 5:30 after he has dinner? Like, I was surprised. And I remember I really couldn't hear too much because of the noise, but I think he said something to me, and I was just like, isn't it past your bedtime? And I just kept walking because ese viejo, eso no sirve para nada, Bob Medina. But that's another conversation. Or other sort of useless government employees, like Maria Rodriguez-Gregg, Laura Bustamante, and others, right? Useless activists like Amy Torres, charisma vacuums when it comes to media and journalism, like, Chucky, Charles Style, or the resident pothead, Matt Friedman. Oh, God help us. Folks, just imagine later on this week that Matt Friedman will be on stage with John Corzine and Christy Whitman, arguably two of the worst governors we've ever had, with a charisma vacuum like Matt Friedman. I mean, I'm hoping that, maybe his wife lets him out of the house, clean shaven and his hair combed. I mean, that's not too much to ask when he's taking the stage, but who knows? Right, folks? Or other, again, useless activists, and we all know who they are. Hetty Rosenstein, as I mentioned before, Patty Campos Medina, Kayla Burrell in Jersey City, Lauren Albrecht with Garden State Equality. Again, other useless women like Jay Lassiter, And I apologize, I couldn't get a better picture of Jay. You may not recognize him because he has something in his mouth. But then again, when doesn't Jay Lassiter have something in his mouth? I mean, that's the norm for Jay. That's a topic for another day, right? Or useless like elected public officials like Ravi Bala and Phil Cohen. And I know, folks, again, don't want to toot my own horn too much, but again, give me some credit here for being able to be very tech savvy and take a picture of Phil Cohen and make sure he can fit within the screen there. I mean, with the size of that nose and those nostrils, it's kind of hard to take a picture of him and make sure it doesn't overwhelm the rest of the, the photo, and make sure it doesn't get too pixelated because it's such a large file. But folks, when we talk about the disservice to journalism, and again, let me be very clear because I said it last week, and I'm a man of my word, folks. It was great during the League of Municipalities to make peace with Insider NJ General Manager Peter Nelia. It's good to do that. Folks, a part of personal growth is knowing when to make peace with people, settle grudges, settle heat, and just be like, hey, let's be gentlemen, let's be men, let's shake hands. Okay? Let's put the past behind us and just move forward, be gentlemen. That's it. And I can do that. And I'm happy to do that. As I've not only talked about it on this show, also my other show, Talking Politics with the Hudson Media Group, where I'm happy to, again, give Peter Nelia his flowers. May not agree with all of his positions, but again, I can be a gentleman and say, he's got a job to do, as do I. Let's shake hands and let's forget about whatever grudges we have. And I'm happy to do that. And again, shout out to the Graham family, to Mike and Ryan Graham, specifically running into them at the League of Municipalities. Where on other occasions, Mike Graham has been like, hey, good to see you. Keep up the good work. So it kind of puts into perspective, folks, that they recognize talent when they see it, right? So I'm happy to make peace and obviously not ridicule or, make jokes at their expense because it's not necessary. I really don't find the need for it. However, what I'm not going to do is give Max Pizarro any immunity because this clown continues to be a joke in New Jersey journalism and media. Okay, folks? That is, and again, what's interesting to me, and I say this all the time, okay? And I'll just give you a perspective here of just, the latest attempt at, when it comes to doing journalism or doing interviews. I mean, folks, if you, and thank God it's only like 4 minutes long, but check this out, folks. Check this out. I mean, how just dry this is. I mean, oh God, I mean, it's a family show, but I can think of a lot of dry things that aren't as dry as Max Pizarro. But check out this, just laughable, and check out this candidate for a House seat during it. So just check it out here. I think you'll enjoy this.
We're in Somerville with Brian Varela. Thank you for joining us, sir. A lot of candidates jumping into this race, sir, and you've been at it for a while. And what's your reaction to all the people now who are crowding into this race?
I think it's a great thing for democracy. I think that the fact is that the more candidates you have in a race, the more options you're giving people. The more options you're giving people, the better of a democracy we have, right? And I think that when you're...
I mean, in fairness to him, I mean, yes, it's great for democracy, but you're also getting a lot of clowns that want to just jump into races that have no business running for office. But again, we do want to make the process as inclusive as possible. So fair enough. But folks, we all know sometimes there's just some people that shouldn't be running for office. It's as simple as that. But, God forbid Max ever brought that up in his columns or ever talked about that. But let's continue. Here's a funny line coming up in a moment. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Looking at all the candidates, you got to look to see who aligns with you the most. And what I would argue are the reasons for supporting us is that we are by far the hardest working campaign. We are out there every single day, 7 days a week. In addition to that is I think that where folks find a lot of synergy with us is in our lived experience, right? The fact is I'm a first generation Hispanic American. I come from a working class background. I paid my way through school. I kept my family afloat. When my mom got sick, I had to raise my younger brother. When she passed, I was about 23 years old. My brother was 13. I built a business from scratch during COVID into one of the fastest growing companies in the country. So somewhere in our story, I think a lot of folks can relate to at least a portion of it, because at some point in life, we've all been behind on our bills, right? We've all had to care for a loved one. We've all some of us have had to raise a sibling or a more distant relative, right? So these are the experiences of just normal everyday Americans. And so being that I come from that background, I think that folks understand when I fight for.
Now, folks, in fairness, that's a good story by Mr. Varela. And I can appreciate that, again, being the son of immigrants myself. And I can appreciate his life story and the trajectory he's been on, which is great. I'm just concerned about who he kind of puts on a pedestal about who he's endorsed by, but you'll see that in a minute.
Policies, when I fight for people here in New Jersey 7, I'm not fighting just to fight. I'm fighting because I know what it feels like. I know what it's like to almost get your home foreclosed on. I know what it's like to not be sure how you're going to keep up with your credit card bills in a month or two, right? And so when you're looking for who your person's going to be, and it doesn't have to be me, right? But just find the person that aligns the most with you, with your lived experience, and with your perspective of the world.
My friend, in addition to the lived experience, in addition to your biography, how are you differentiating yourself in this very broad field on the issues?
So I think what we really have demonstrated to show is that, look, there's a lot of depth to our campaign, right? We have a very wide tent. We've had the pleasure of being endorsed by the likes of Patricia Campos Medina and Steve Sweeney. So it just shows how much support we've been able to generate.
So let me get this straight. So it's a wide tent, but when you're looking for endorsements, and I said this before earlier in the show, you got to be careful who you get endorsements from. Folks, can someone explain to me? And I get it. She's somewhat respected in progressive circles. I don't know why, right? But what exactly does an endorsement from Patty Cash, as I like to refer to her, Patty Campos Medina, what exactly comes to mind as it pertains to policies that make sense when it comes to her? Now, again, to Varela, with all due respect, you can listen to whoever you want when it comes to your operatives, but again, no disrespect to the former state Senate President, Steve Sweeney, who I've had the pleasure of interviewing, and we've agreed to disagree, and that's fine. But folks, again, really? You want to have a white tent, that's fine. But really, I don't think you should be dropping a name like Patty Campos Medina, who, folks, again, is a woman with a very shady and checkered past, whether it's with Latina Civic or pissing off people with Latina Civic Action or Lupe or whatever other organization she's been a part of. Folks, she always finds the way to piss people off. She always finds the way to make herself, I guess, the reminder that she's insufferable. May not be the person you want to sort of hook your tails into and say, hey, this is a woman I definitely want endorsing me. No, you want to stay as far away from that campesina as possible. Okay? It does you no good, folks. It doesn't move the needle to have insufferable progressives like her in your tent. Because again, if you're running in CD7, right, and that's a seat that's currently occupied by U.S. Representative Tom Kean Jr., well, what exactly are you going to talk about? Affordability? Again, folks, Democrats have controlled New Jersey for over 25 years legislatively. There will now be a Democrat as governor for the third consecutive term. So when you're trying to talk about, affordability and what it costs to live here, you can't blame Tom Kean for that. I know Democrats want to sort of ostracize him and hang him out to dry for being so supportive of the president. Again, folks, he voted for the big, beautiful bill, which, again, doesn't take effect until January. So the tax cuts that you read about this summer when it was signed take effect in January 1st. No tax on tips. No tax on Social Security. Like, things are going to help working class Americans, working class New Jerseyans. So what exactly are you going to fight against? We'll leave it to Max to never want to write about that. Because, folks, when it comes to Trump derangement syndrome, leading the way in New Jersey media, folks, it's always Max Pizarro. But let's continue here.
Across the political spectrum, right? And I think when you're looking at us, you really want to find the person who understands the working and middle class voter the best, and that is me, right? I think you also want to make sure that the person that you're looking for has an unmatched work ethic. That is also me, and someone that understands why focusing on affordability is so critical at this moment in time, right? The truth is that every single day that passes, your dollar is going, it's not going as far as it used to, right? So we got to make sure we get someone in place who's going to fight for policies that are going to put this economy back on track.
Last question. you define yourself as a progressive, but you're also very keyed into a number of issues and the economy in a way that perhaps appeals to a broader array of people. And you mentioned the endorsements by both Campos, Medina, and Sweeney. What does the elimination of the line, the so-called party line, do for your candidacy in this particular cycle?
Sure. So,
by the way, I mean, again, I know Max had a party in his pants just having to uplift, Patty Campos Medina, but the only person that matters in terms of endorsement is a guy who's held elected office, and that's Steve Sweeney. Now, I disagree with Steve Sweeney on some policy decisions and some positions he's taken on his voting record, sure, but what exactly is there to glorify about Patty Campos Medina, Max? Like, this woman hasn't done shit. I mean, please, educate me on this, Max. And I know Max doesn't have the balls to come on the show because I would cook him alive, but I mean, that's another conversation for another day. But let's hold people accountable, Max. Let's stop kind of peddling bullshit when it comes to, these endorsements and what they mean. They don't mean shit. I think Steve Sweeney's endorsement carries some weight, sure. He did not have a good showing during the primary. And I think that a lot of what happened with New Jersey becoming more unaffordable, the awful COVID mandates that we had to live through, folks, Steve Sweeney was a part of that. Let's call balls and strikes fairly here. It's 5 years later. Okay? But Phil Murphy shutting down the state longer than he should have, having ridiculous mask mandates, the social distancing, all the other bullshit during COVID. Steve Sweeney was a part of that, folks. Steve Sweeney enabled that. So, again, I can give respect to Steve Sweeney on some things on his voting record, but part of the reason New Jersey continues to be unaffordable, right? Part of the reason that some New Jerseyans lost their jobs by not being vaccinated or not wearing masks were because of Steve Sweeney letting Governor Murphy run crazy with mask mandates and COVID mandates in New Jersey. So be careful about who you want to uplift, Max. And I get it for someone like you that never leaves his house. I mean, let's be honest. Other than going to the league to drink on the Grand's tab at Cuba Libre at the Tropicana, and maybe occasionally leaving your house for one or two stories, maybe every quarter. I mean, those awful mandates didn't affect Max. He's home scratching his ass. But for the rest of us to actually work, like real work, Max, like yours truly does, and other people in New Jersey, yeah, those mask mandates, those vaccine mandates, those COVID mandates really effed us. They did. So I'd be careful about putting Steve Sweeney on a pedestal. To say nothing of the fact about even putting Medina on a pedestal. This woman hasn't done shit. She's just useless as her husband. And that's saying something because Bob Medina is perhaps the most useless person in New Jersey. And that's saying a lot. Right? But let's continue.
And I will say I don't necessarily identify myself as a progressive. I think that it depends on the issue, right? There are issues where I believe in universal health care. I believe in universal child care, right? And then there's issues where I believe, I'm someone who early on was actually thinking that, we needed to have stronger borders, right? So it just depends on the issue itself.
All right, bro, can you make a decision? Do you believe in sovereignty or not? Like, you can't just change positions on the wind just because you want to maybe stick with a progressive base, like universal health. Folks, anything that's universal, guess what? It's paid by somebody. It's not free. Nothing is free, folks. You're all going to learn that across the river in Manhattan on January 1st. Okay? With the radical jihadist socialist that just became the mayor-elect in New York City. Nothing's free, folks. Somebody has to pay for it. The money has to come from somewhere. That's the problem with progressives. Again, their heart's in the right place, but their head's up their ass. Clearly, this guy is no different. God forbid Max would call it out, but again, that would require Max to have, wait for it, espere, that fourth syllable word that Max Pizarro struggles with, integrity, among other words. Let's continue.
When I think about the line, I think that there are a lot of folks who were not happy about it. But the truth is that if you look at NJ7, if you look at NJ11, if you look at NJ12, you have an abundance of riches of very qualified candidates. So by eliminating the line, you're now giving people more options, right? And when you have more options, you have a stronger democracy. And how it affects our race, it doesn't, right? Why? Because regardless of if there's a line, if there's no line, right, we're going to work just as hard. And it's not just to win support from one side of the base, but to win support all across the base. So I think that when it comes to our specific candidacy, do I like the fact that the line is gone? Absolutely. Would we fight just as hard if there was a line? Yes, we absolutely would.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Here in Somerville.
Well, folks, again, if you need something to make you go to sleep, trust me. Anytime Max Pizarro does an interview for 4 minutes, I mean, you could always rely on that. But what's interesting, folks, about looking at congressional races and looking at what makes New Jersey unaffordable, this is where, again, Max continues to do you a disservice. And when you read, obviously, the latest column featuring Mr. Varela there, okay, and his candidacy, again, Max seems to forget facts. And folks, here on this show, we care about facts. We don't care about feelings or emotions. We don't care about being hyperbolic and about, oh my God, the threats to democracy and somehow incoming fascism. None of that shit is happening. You would know that by reading the garbage that Max Pizarro peddles. But here on this show, folks, here we tell you the truth. Here we give you facts, not feelings, not emotions. Okay? This isn't like listening to your girlfriend or your wife bitch and moan about something that has no significance. Folks, we talk about facts here. We can be objective, and we're logical on this show, folks. We're rational. Okay? That's what I pride myself on here. But when you read Max's columns and when he interviews progressives like this guy or others, what he forgets, again, are some very simple numbers here. And I just want to read you some stuff here, as you can see there. Okay, now, folks, Engaged Politics is an objective, nonpartisan political think tank that gives you numbers. God forbid Max used Google or actually did some homework instead of just peddling the same Trump derangement syndrome that he's become famous for, along with others at Insider NJ, like John Van Vliet, Alan Steinberg, who I guess, it's 7. Yeah, he's asleep also. Or Jay Lassiter, or Bob Hannelly, or other contributors at Insider NJ that, again, that really exhibit really bad symptoms of Trump derangement. Okay? But if you want to talk about affordability in New Jersey, you want to talk about what a difference a year makes, let's talk about what a difference a year makes. And let's think about, again, we just celebrated Thanksgiving. Folks, have you seen her on our book tour? Trust me, if you have anything to be thankful for, we avoided the queen of word salads being elected to the presidency last November in 2024. Don't know it to Max, because Max is still thinking that, free speech is, and fascism is coming. But unlike Max, let me be the bearer of good news here, because there's a lot of good news to report on. Okay? So, of course, nowhere, anywhere in Max's columns in the last presidential administration did you hear about numbers, but I'll tell you some numbers that matter. Because you just saw the folks this past weekend during Black Friday and today during Cyber Monday, we're seeing consumers spending money. It's a healthier economy. That's all there is to it. You wouldn't know that reading Max because, again, Max would rather bitch and moan about Trump derangement syndrome. But here's some numbers that are irrefutable, folks. Again, inflation in 2022 was 8%. Guess what? It's gone down to 3%. In the first year of the second Trump administration. Interest rates in 2022 were 5.75%. So if you were interested in purchasing a home, that was a little difficult. It's gone down to 3%. Here's interesting. And again, not that it matters to Max, because when you're making $100,000 a year en la casa, rascándote los huevos, haciendo nada, porque tú eres un huevón, of course, here we go. In 2022, gas was up to $5 a gallon. Okay? Never mind the gas tax here in New Jersey. Folks, gas is down to $3, if not less, throughout New Jersey, for example. Folks, those are economic trends that are favorable. Right? Here's a big one, because I know how Max feels about, border crossings and sovereignty, because back when Max, took high school history some years ago, I think, you may not remember it since Max is like mid to late 70s at this point. But somewhere along the line when Max was in high school and he took U.S. history, I'm hoping he remembers, distinguished courses, remembers that part of the federal government's job is to enforce the borders, to preserve sovereignty. Unlike the last 4 years, where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris let in tens of millions of illegals. Not a peep from Max Pizarro. Again, that will require Max to leave his house. But this lazy bastard doesn't do that. So we wouldn't know about the harm that illegals were contributing to not just New Jersey, but the country. But what do you know? Border crossings have dropped 84% from September 2024 to September 2025 and are 93% lower overall than when Joe Biden was in office. Folks, that's called results. Here's some other numbers here. Tariff revenue in 2024 was $77 billion. Tariffs that the second Trump administration administered, guess what? Gross revenues in 2025 produced $165 billion. 83% of USAID programs have been terminated, saving approximately $60 billion a year in taxpayer money. You know, all those bullshit USAID programs, like LGBTQ studies in Nicaragua, or studying trans trends in, I don't know, Holland or wherever else. All this woke bullshit, all this identity nonsense that for the last 4 years, the Biden administration happily enabled. But not a word from Max, because Max would rather, again, scream about, oh my God, democracy is eroding and there's incoming fascism. None of that shit's happening, Max. But again, continue peddling your bullshit, which is why no one takes you seriously, especially on this show. All right? Oh, here we go. Refugee visas before 2024 were at an all-time high of 125,000. Well, guess what? Refugee visas after 2024 going into this second Trump administration dropped considerably to 7,500. How about H-1B visas? And the fee before 2024 was $460. Now, after 2024, in the new Trump administration, they're up to $100,000. Good. Just can't let everyone in, Max. Again, sovereignty, borders. I'm sure 60 years ago when you were in high school and you took U.S. history, you probably remember that. All right? Again, the United States of America now has amicable friendships and has been forming alliances with countries like Syria and Saudi Arabia and Egypt that have been hostile to the United States. Again, promoting peace in the Middle East without war. The Gaza peace settlement. It wasn't possible with Joe Biden. Joe Biden was sleeping. And whoever was signing orders, obviously we all know was the auto pen. But not a word from Max. Because that, again, will require Max to have what's called, trust me, folks, it's a big word for Max, integrity. I'll say it again, integrity. Max doesn't have any. We have it on this show. That's the difference, right? And trust me, the second Trump administration is doing this by not advocating for war, but forming alliances. Folks, I don't know what to tell you. And I get it that this past election cycle obviously wasn't great for Republicans in New Jersey or in Virginia, or even across the river. But folks, Trump derangement syndrome has an expiration date. It just has to. Because at the end of the day, folks, what I just gave you were numbers, facts, not feelings and emotions. If I want hyperbole and overly emotional bullshit, I can rely on this clown, this useless mother effer who does nothing but do a disservice to journalism. Folks, you want to know who doesn't do a disservice to journalism? Again, the generational talent in Garden State Media. The leader in trustworthy journalism, Fernando Uribe. Folks, we're not the same. And the numbers prove that. Maybe Max, you might want to take a lesson here, Max. You're doing these bullshit interviews that nobody watches with questions that, a kindergarten student could come up with. Come on. Give us something juicy. Give us something fulfilling. Give me something intellectually stimulating. Oh, never mind. Because when I think of intellectual stimulation, I don't think of Max Pizarro. And those are my final thoughts. Folks, special comment tonight here. And again, I cannot say enough. As I'm approaching year 4 here with Jersey First TV. Another successful month here in 2025. 95,000 plus views for the month of November. Again, folks, all organic. Nothing boosted. No paid ads. People tuning in on Facebook and X and Instagram and LinkedIn and on YouTube. Thank you to everybody that continues to make Real Talk the success that it is. And again, I cannot say enough. And folks, I'm deeply humbled by your support. By everyone that tunes in live. By everyone that shares the replay. And folks, and you know I'm not the most humble guy around. But I'm humbled by your support. Because without all of you at home, that number, that success that I enjoy would not be possible. So to everybody, and I said it last week during Thanksgiving dinner, when saying grace, and I said it last week, I'm truly thankful to all of you at home that make Real Talk really a part of your Monday night viewing when it comes to New Jersey politics. I'm truly thankful to all of you. I'm grateful. And to all of you that tune in, friends, family, frenemies, and especially the haters. You know who they are here in Hudson County, especially. All the social justice clowns, the woke fools, the obese feminists, the insufferable, smelly cat ladies. I can smell the cat piss by looking at their social media. The Alphabet Bob and everybody else, folks. Without all of you, that number wouldn't be possible. So from my heart, thank you for making Real Talk the success that it continues to be in 2025 and going into 2026. My other special comment, folks, I want to wish a happy birthday to the president and CEO of the statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Carlos Medina. The actual real credible Medina in the Medina family, not Bob or Patty, but Carlos, who celebrated a birthday yesterday. I made sure to wish him a happy birthday on social media. But guess what, Carlos? I want to wish you un feliz cumpleaños aquí. You're one of the best people I know in New Jersey, not just in the business community, but one of the better human beings that I know. So I'm grateful for our rapport. I'm thankful for our friendship. Happy birthday to you, Carlos. Here's to many more with an abundance of health and happiness, because you do the Medina name a considerable credit and bring it considerable grace and bring it considerable decency. Can't say the same for your brother or your sister-in-law. Yeah, they're shitting the bed on that one. But folks, Carlos Medina, an exceptional human being. Happy birthday to you, Carlos. Que cumpla muchos más. Te quiero mucho. Feliz cumpleaños. There to Carlos Medina. Again, a great member of our business community, the president and CEO of the statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Folks, and that's our show for this week. Once again, I want to thank Brent Johnson, the columnist and politics reporter for NJ Advanced Media. Again, folks, like, comment, and share tonight's episode here on the program. Helps the show grow and it helps get the show out to more people. Again, I'm grateful to all of you. And make sure, of course, that you like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and X, support us on YouTube, and, of course, wherever you get your podcasts. Whether it's Spotify or SoundCloud, folks, download it and take Jersey First TV with you. It is December. Maybe you're driving to all the holiday parties that we'll get to enjoy in the month of December. I know I'll be looking forward to seeing everybody at the Jersey First holiday party. Again, make sure you RSVP with Jersey First TV for the location, folks, this Wednesday. Look forward to seeing everyone there. And, of course, coming up with my own holiday happy hour coming up on Friday, December the 12th at the world-famous One Republic in North Arlington in Bergen County. Again, you can come bring a toy, get a drink ticket, and help make the holidays a happier time for local kids during this holiday season. Again, folks, you're on your phone, your smartphone, tablet, PC, whatever. Check out Jersey First. Trust me, you'll never be disappointed. Of course, always leading the way here. Proud to do that, folks, for Jersey First TV. Again, like, comment, and share tonight's episode. It really does help the show grow, and it helps get the show out to more people. And quite frankly, folks, we'll continue to be the leader here in independent media here in the great state of New Jersey. And always remember, folks, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's Real Talk right here on the Jersey First Television Network. I am the generational talent in Garden State Media and your leader and trustworthy journalism. That's right, folks. It's me, Fernando Uribe. Shout out to everybody in Cowboys Nation. Our great week last week, beating the Eagles, beating the Chiefs. Who's next? The Lions? Coming up on Thursday in the thick of the playoff race, folks. The Cowboys are in it. And better be careful with the Dallas Cowboys. They get in, they can make some noise in the NFC. We'll see in the coming weeks here in December. But again, folks, please party responsibly. Thank you so much for tuning in here. Again, I cannot say enough for everyone that likes, comments, and shares the episode, watches it live, or shares the replay. Without all of you, the success of Real Talk with Fernando Uribe would not be possible. I love you all. Thank you for tuning in here, folks. Again, take care of yourselves. Thanks for stopping by, and always remember, stay classy, everyone.